Since beginning after the end is finally returning, I feel it's finally time to go over the coldest protagonist in manhwa history, Arthur Lewin. We are talking about a guy who can simply look at you and make you shiver with fear. He's built different. Arthur begins his journey as a baby, born as the son of Alice and Reynolds Lewin. He was reincarnated after being assassinated in his former life as a king. In his former life as Grey, he went through nothing but pain, shown by the fact that he admits that many wants him dead and has no idea who even assassinated him. To fill the void in his heart, he spent his entire life training in the art of swordsmanship and mastery of his ki center, and he actually became the strongest. Yet, he was not inherently gifted in that life, but that is not the case when he is reincarnated. When he's reborn, he immediately starts his training to protect his new family, as unlike his life as King Grey, he wants to live this life to the fullest, but to do so, he has to get as strong as physically possible to keep his family safe. He begins studying as soon as he can crawl, reading about how magic works in this new world and the stages of it. Due to his previous mastery over his ki center, which works very similarly to the mana core in this new world, he awakens to mana at just 2 years old. He does this by forming a center of magic from scattered fragments throughout his body, and after doing so, he destroyed his entire house with his power. This is insane, since even a prodigy of the elves later on only manages to destroy her room. Even the most talented of humans awaken at the age of 10, but still couldn't do anything with their mana because they were simply too young. But Arthur is able to make use of his mana almost immediately because of his maturity. And being able to control mana in itself is extremely rare, as only 1 in 10 people can actually do so. The two most common mages are either augmenters or conjurers, and Arthur is born an augmenter. Augmenters enhance their bodies with mana, allowing them to possess incredible strength, defense, and agility. But their weakness is the fact that they're more talented in close range and don't really have long range attacks. Whereas with conjurers, they emit mana to the outside world, allowing them to bend their surroundings to their will. But their weakness is the fact that they have to supplement their own mana core with mana from the outside world to actually form a spell, meaning that it actually takes longer. But Arthur doesn't have that weakness, and trust me, his attacks later on are in no way inferior to conjurers. Arthur, shortly after awakening, trains with his father in swordsmanship, but since he was a master in this craft in his previous life, Arthur was way more interested in studying and upgrading his magic. So, to get his father off his back, he agrees to train in the sword and terrifies him. His skill in the sword trumps anyone, and this is despite him being in a smaller body than he's used to, which is stated throughout the series holds him back considerably. And people know he'll be a monster when he ages more. Also, we learn the power levels in this world, and that someone's mana core differs in colour depending on their level. The order goes as follows: black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and white, and each stage is split into 3 shades: dark, solid, and light. The lighter the mana core, the more pure it is and the more power it has. His father, Reynolds, knows that Arthur is a prodigy and doesn't feel worthy as a tutor for him, as he won't be able to bring out his full potential, so he moves to get him a proper mentor. This is where Arthur meets the Twin Horns, a party of mages and friends that his parents were acquainted with. Obviously, they comment on his maturity for his age, and whilst travelling, he too shocks the members of the party with his power. Even Jasmine, a prodigy of the Flameswear family, is fascinated by his swordsmanship, wanting to learn more from his unique movement techniques. The journey continues to go well as they make their way to Xyrus, but the party is attacked by a group of slave traders and bandits. Arthur is disgusted by these people and is ready to fight, but his mother coddles him and he finds out from his father that she is in fact pregnant and can't use their mana properly because of it. The Twin Horns perform admirably, but there are too many enemies, and eventually they are overrun, and Arthur is entrusted to keep his mother safe and his unborn sibling inside of her. Arthur manages to protect his mother, much to the chagrin of all the enemies around him, but he has to attack one of the mages to protect her. But to defeat this mage, he has to take out himself in the process. In doing this, he almost dies and is actually presumed dead by his family. But as he lays down, barely hanging on, he starts to remember his former life, where he quit being king because he felt like he fixed nothing and he was never fulfilled in his role. He did achieve his goal of becoming the strongest, but there was no point, as everything he ever loved had disappeared. This made him realise how much he already cherished this new life, and he would give up anything in his previous life just to see his parents and new friends again. But even to his own shock, he survives the fall. After hours of lying almost paralyzed, he manages to stand through the pain and hears a dignified and beautiful voice talking to him. He doesn't want to trust this voice, but she tells him that she's the only one who can get him home. So he pleads for her help in the most dignified way he can. She gives him these directions and he makes his way over to her, and once he gets over, he sees this. Her name is Sylvia. She tells Arthur that it'll take a considerable amount of time to open up a dimensional rift strong enough to take him home, meaning that yes, she can in fact distort space. In between creating this portal, she talks and bonds with Arthur as she admits that she hides in seclusion since she has no one left, and Arthur certainly knows how that feels. She was in a battle and was left with a wound that continues to fester. Arthur thinks about the bandits that almost killed him and separated him from his family, trembling with rage. But Sylvie calms him down, telling him that hatred and vengeance will never bring about any good. But this obviously had us all thinking and waiting for the moment where his rage could no longer be contained. Anyway, she questions how Arthur is so young but already has a mana core more developed than most adults, since most humans awaken at 12 or 13 years old. And Arthur informs her, humbly, that he's a genius, which to be fair isn't even arrogant, it's just the truth. So she trains Arthur to use his mana more effectively and circulate it as he moves and fights. This was a near impossible feat, but as we just mentioned, Arthur is a genius. After some time, he finally gets the hang of it, but then Sylvie falls to the floor as it turns out that the reason her wound was festering and getting worse was because of the dimensional rift she was opening for Arthur to get home. Arthur cries like a child, mirroring his outside appearance for the first time, and is not willing to accept losing someone whom he now considers family. Sylvie reveals her true form in her last moments, as she's revealed to be a dragon, and she has to use this form to finish the portal. But since her armor / veil is removed, her enemies will soon arrive. She leaves Arthur with an egg that he knows is extremely fragile and knows he has to protect no matter what. But she also leaves him with something that affects his entire body with symbols, before pushing him into the portal while she is captured or, more likely, killed. Sylvie transported him to a forest in the middle of nowhere, and leaves him with a message. She informs Arthur that she left him with her unique will, and depending on his development as a mage, the stronger this gift will be. These are her powers and abilities, meaning that in the future, Arthur could also learn to manipulate space like she did, but on a much higher level since he'll have her powers multiplied by his own. Sylvie tells Arthur that he'll only hear from her again once his mana core is past the white stage, and looking at this scale, yeah, Arthur is nowhere near ready, as the white stage is supposed to be the most powerful, and yet apparently there is a stage beyond that. She ends their message with, "Farewell, King Grey," meaning that she knew of his true nature all along, but despite this, she was much older than both of his lifetimes combined, and Arthur truly had a family member who accepted him, which surely made him even more depressed knowing that he'll never see her again. But it also makes him a lot more determined to protect the family he still has, and he begins to explore the Forest of Elshire, which is the name of the forest that Sylvie transported him to, which turns out to be very close to the elven kingdom of Eleanor. Before Arthur can even catch his breath thinking about why Sylvie would even send him here, he hears screams and finds a young elven girl being kidnapped by slave traders. This strikes a nerve with Arthur as he goes on a mission with his new powers from his training with Sylvie and his mastery of swordsmanship to kill every single one of them. He shows his darker side as he wants to use them to let off some steam with no regrets. Arthur knows that attacking all of these four mages at the same time would be suicide, even for him, so he binds his time and plans his moves accordingly, and patiently, not blinded by his rage, showing that his battle IQ and composure is also next level when compared to others. Arthur kills the first mage with a technique from his previous world, creating a blade of mana and cutting him down with no hesitation, taking his weapon since he is an augmenter, and he'll be able to enhance that blade and fight a lot more effectively than a mana blade, unlike a conjurer would. He leaves his body to the wolves to lure over another slave trader. I mean, Arthur's literally treating this like it's a video game, and he slices him open, looking absolutely terrifying in the process. Unfortunately, the elf they kidnap makes noise, attracting the final two at the same time. Arthur uses this to deal with him cutting his Achilles tendons to ensure he can't move. The last is revealed to be the strongest since, of course he is, and Arthur struggles a lot more. He uses his environment against him using a previous trick that he learned against the bandit when he pushed him off the cliff. A string of mana which he uses to throw his knife, but this also does not work. Arthur realizes that the mana he's been using to turn his magic into a blade is actually a form of wind magic, and he realizes that if he wants to use fire magic, he should condense his mana into a fine point and explode it. This ends the fight as Arthur decapitates him and deals with the last who can't even move. This shows shows how much he's grown in power, as when the bandits attacked his family, he could barely deal with one of them, almost dying, but now he can kill 4 adult mages with relative ease, and he's learned 2 new attributes of magic, fire and wind. After dealing with them, he reaches for the young, scared elven girl, promising that she's safe now, and he plans to leave her there to find his family, but come on Arthur, she can't just be left alone in the middle of a forest, she's like 5 years old. He then gathers supplies and starts a new journey to get this little elf home, whose name is revealed to be Tessia. Shortly into their travels, Arthur starts to suffer horrendous pain in his mana core without knowing the reason. Despite the mental age gap between these two, they grow closer and they finally arrive to her home. But it turns out that she's a princess because of course she is. Elves, for the most part, are not the biggest fans of humans, and for good reason, but when Arthur tells the king and queen about his acts of heroism, they are skeptical, but Arthur just wants to see his family again. They grant his request for this because no matter what happened, he did return Tessia to them safely. Despite granting his request, they can't send Arthur home immediately, since unfortunately the teleportation gate that's linked with Sapphire Kingdom is only accessible every 7 years, during the summit conference between the 3 races, and it'll be another 5 years until it opens again. However, luckily for Arthur, the king is genuinely extremely grateful for what he did, so he says he'll be happy to send a group of guards to escort him back home safely. And so, shortly after, he stays the night in the royal palace but senses an intruder and immediately goes to attack. But it turns out to be Ririan Erelith, the grandfather of Tessia and the former king, who wanted to test Arthur since he senses that he could be someone interesting. They fight for a while, and whilst Arthur is tremendously outmatched, due to his age, Ririan is arrogant and underestimates him, which causes Arthur to actually land a blow on him. After seeing Arthur's talent, he asks him to be his disciple. Arthur is shocked since humans aren't welcome here, and it wouldn't be taken very well if a human was chosen to be the disciple of the former king. But they can't really stop Ririan from doing so. Ririan knows that at only 4 years old, Arthur is more talented than adult mages, and whilst Arthur wants to accept, he can't do so without informing his family of his safety. But Ririan tells him that he can give him a way to do this and communicate with them, and also fix the horrendous bout of pain he's been experiencing. He explains to Arthur what exactly a beast will is. A-ranked beasts or higher have the ability to pass on their powers to someone they trust, which is what Sylvie did to Arthur. Ririan knows this since he is a beast tamer, making him the perfect master and tutor for Arthur. Arthur now has to accept this tutelage since Sylvia's court is revealed would kill him if not dealt with as soon as possible, since the power is far too potent and it's way more powerful than Ririan knows. He makes it very clear that Arthur is his student and tells his son, you know, the king, to make sure everyone knows this, meaning that Arthur as a toddler is already becoming a catalyst that can unite 2 races that have been at odds for years. Ririan takes Arthur to a woman called Rinia Darkazon. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. A deviant with extremely unique abilities. She is a diviner, meaning that she can see through anyone at an instant, and no one can hide anything from her eyes. And she sees how special Arthur is, having capabilities that transcend her visions. And she also tells him that she knows about his past life. We'll go into that more later, as for the time being, Arthur just wants to talk to his family and she gives him an outlet to do so. Once he manages to communicate with them through her magic, he finds them in a spiral and extremely depressed since, you know, they believe he died. He contacts them and tells them he's okay, but he can't return yet because of an illness he has that needs to be treated in the Elven Kingdom. So, with a peace of mind, he begins his training in the Elven Kingdom with Ririan. Before starting his training though, he's taken around the Elven Kingdom by Tessia to explore it more, and in the process ends up being challenged by this random kid called Favorth Ivysaur. Okay, that's not his real name, but no one actually cares. Arthur beats him in about 2.3 seconds and carries on with his exploration. He does eventually make it to Ririan, who tells him that the pain he's about to experience from mastering how to use his beast will be unlike anything he's ever experienced. And apparently it feels like you're boiling your body in tar. But if he manages to do it, he'll become a monster. And after what Ririan said, Arthur is nothing but excited for his training. And this is where Season 1 comes to an end. Now, if you guys want to see the next part of Arthur Lewin's story and his insane powers, which trust me, are only going to get more crazy as it continues, make sure to subscribe. Since this is my first Man Horror video, I really appreciate the support, and if you guys have other characters whose story you want me to cover, let me know down below and click the video on screen right now for more peak fiction.